Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today, another lifestyle review of an old friend. Now, if you've followed my channel for long enough, you will know that I've bought and owned this watch so many times. Actually, I had this particular model twice, then I had the Speedy Reduced 2 and the Michael Schumacher Special Edition Racing with the little hints of red. So I thought, you know what, let's revisit it. How do I feel about it now after a couple of years of not owning it? And I've got to say, there isn't a month that goes past without me considering buying it back. So this is, of course, the automatic reduced, the original reduced. And it's a bit of a bone of contention with some Speedy purists. And in a moment, you'll understand just why. So let's get into this watch.
If, like me, you love the everlasting handsome look and feel of Omega's most famous watch, but felt a tad overpowered by its unusually large, for the time, 42mm size, you would have undoubtedly considered the Speedy Reduced at some point. Or perhaps you simply were not into manually wound pieces and that daily routine would simply slip the mind. Well, Omega was thinking precisely of you. First introduced in 1988, the Speedmaster Reduced was intended as a smaller and more affordable version of the Speedy Professional. Once in hand or on the wrist, the first thing that will become immediately apparent is the smaller scale. The version we're looking at today is in stainless steel, but later it became available in gold, as well as two-tone, and exploded in a seemingly never-ending variety of versions, complications, dial colors, and not to mention special editions. But one thing that has always been consistent was the case. It pretty much remained the same during its 2-decade run. Although the official Omega website erroneously states it's 39mm, it's actually 38mm in diameter, with a lovely 12mm height and a well-balanced 44mm lug to lug with an appropriately proportioned 18mm lug width. It was therefore aptly named the Speedmaster Reduced, which I've always thought is somewhat of a derogatory term, considering just how much of a cracking little and beautifully compact watch you actually get. I went on to own the 39mm manual wind first Omega in space after owning several versions of the Reduced in a vain effort to upgrade my Speedy, so to speak, but sadly to never any success. This was mainly because, well, despite being an automatic, unlike the FOIS, the Reduced always wore remarkably slender, and more like a 36mm Rolex Datejust than a Speedy. Its weight and feel on the bracelet was about the same on my 6¼ wrist. The hands are your quintessential Speedy white baton hands, complementing the crisply white printed Omega logo and script, giving it very much that pro feel. The matte black dial does have its own unique layout that has been rather divisive to many, with the subdials pushed outwards due to accommodating the movement. There are splendidly added numerals for the minutes, a detail that ironically gives more of a racing feel, even compared to the Pro. A clever but subtle design nod to its initial racing chronograph intentions when the first Speedies were released back in 1957. This was of course before the Speedy became the definitive NASA-approved watch of epic space exploration and moon landings. Despite the compact layout of the subdials cutting into the ultra-precise minutes and seconds tracks, the numerals are wonderfully placed surrounding them and are not cut off in any shape or form. This gives the chronograph a highly respectable legibility and practicality that I feel is worthy of the Speedmaster name. The hour markers are loomed, as well as the hour and minutes hand, and depending on which reduced version you get and how old it is, sometimes they still work too. But for the most part, many of the references 35, 10, 50 will have the markers starting to patina gracefully with a genuine vintage light creamy sand colour that in my opinion looks really cool. This particular example has that to look forward to. Even if the Reduced is slightly more diminutive in scale compared to the Pro, don't be fooled. It's perfectly formed and the case is almost identical to the Pro in style. The only exception being the lower crown compared to the pushers. This is due to the modular movement, which we'll discuss shortly. This also explains why the running seconds are on the opposite side, as you would see in your typical Moonwatch. The twisted, curvaceous lugs have sharply contrasting finishes of brushed and high polish, giving it a very 1950s feel that almost makes one think of the tail wings of a Cadillac of that era. The profile of the case is perhaps its most definitive characteristic that screams speedy to me. The splendidly super wide beveling that runs lug to lug, the sunken pushers and crown recessed marginally into the case for protection, and of course the raised UFO section that juts out over the main body and frames the very pronounced domed Hesselite crystal to deliberately accentuate it. The exaggerated arc of the crystal that gives the viewer some of the most pleasingly alluring distortions really helps to provide that vintage character. No Speedy would be complete without a tachymeter. Here it is in a semi-gloss aluminium bezel insert with silver markings identical to the Pro. A sensible choice, as this is unequivocally one of the design hallmarks that, if changed too much, could risk losing that instantly recognizable Speedy identity. Inside we have a bit of a confusing story. The movements of the no-date Speedmaster reduced watches went by many different names over the years. Initially it was the Caliber 1140 in 1988, followed by the Caliber 1141 until 1996. Then it became the Caliber 1143 from 1996, and finally in 2002, the Caliber 3220. Regardless of the designation, the movement is a time-only modified 2892-A2. This base movement is then fitted with a Dubuis 2020 chronograph module on top, giving it an extraordinary high amount of 47 joules. The automatic Caliber 3220 offers the user 40 hours of power reserve, operating at 28,800 vibrations an hour, with hacking, hand winding, and the ability to record up to 12 hours. Accuracy-wise, from all the 4 versions I have owned over the years, I have found it to be mostly dependable, with a range from more or less -3 seconds to +13 at the very most. Although an integrated chronograph movement is more elegant, robust, and less complicated to service, you do, however, get to experience a lovely smooth actuation, especially compared to the Caliber 1861, for example. The watch has a 30 meters water resistance and a screw-down caseback, where you will find the handsomely but modestly sized engraved hippocampus, the beast of Greek mythology that ties in so well with the brand's name. The watch comes on a 5-link untapered steel bracelet that has 3 links in the center polished and is flanked by brushed outer links. Even though it is rather dated compared to today's Omega offerings, it does have a charming fluidity to the fit and feel. It is held together by a pins and collar system that honestly has never been my favorite. The signed stamped clasp is unfortunately a product of its day and of course rather basic. It's fastened by pressure and has no safety foldover. But on the plus side, you do get some micro adjustments, and once properly fitted, it is actually comfortable. Thankfully, the monochromatic color scheme combined with the refined, sporty/dressy feel of the Speedy has always made this watch an absolute joy to swap out, and literally will work with any strap combination imaginable. In conclusion, this watch will forever hold a special place in my heart. Its pure class certification prevails, even with the numerous faults that have only increased over the years as it nears vintage status. It still has a lovable charm all of its own. Of course, it has become totally outgunned by its heavily upgraded successor, the reference 353950, which incidentally I have also owned and loved at one point. Eventually, the entire reduced line was finally and inevitably replaced by the racing coaxial-based contemporaries. So with their discontinuation, is it any wonder that their price has steadily increased for one in a good condition, like this example we see here? Its ineffable charisma still endures, even if it will always be in the shadow of its manually wound and more prestigious bigger brother.
Let's discuss the positives first. It's an old friend. It's like being reacquainted with an old friend. That that Speedmaster feel is still there. You have all that intrinsic style cues, the aesthetic, the monochromatic scheme, the legibility. At first glance, it does look like a Speedy. However, it's got its own little flair, and a lot of the reduce, not so much the second version, do that, you know, with the minute markings. It's a subtle way of differentiating itself from the professional. Just like its bigger brother, it's also a strap monster, certified strap monster. I can't think of any strap combination. NATO, rubber strap. Actually, if you look back in my channel, you would have noticed I've tried it literally with everything. The biggest advantage has to be the fact that obviously it's an automatic. If you're not into your manual wind pieces, then this is the way to go. Those little minute markings also, to me, it's like a little nod back to the early racing. The initial intention of the Speedmaster, let's not forget, was a racing chronograph before, you know, it went to space and all the rest of it. So I kind of like that. In fact, those minute markings, it reminds me of a dashboard dial in a car or something like that. But unequivocally, its biggest advantage has to be the size. I think this is more fashionable than ever, to be honest. And if you do love the Speedmaster and the moon-going 42mm size, then this perhaps is just right for you. I mean, I actually started with the Pro, and then I went back to this, and the whole thing started like that. Something that I do appreciate, and it's a very slight little thing, but nobody really mentions it, is that with the automatic, it is actually hackable, unlike the 1861 of the Pro. Something I really do appreciate about the Speedmaster, and this goes for all Speedmasters, that, you know, this certainly has. It's a classic design, it's a timeless design, it's always going to look good. And part of it is the inherent versatility, where you can put it on a strap, wear it for more formal attire. I think it works great. I mean, just look at George Clooney when he's in his ambassadorial role wearing a Speedy in a tux. And then again, you can wear it casually too. It's just, it really has that do-it-all versatility. But at the end of the day, it has Speedmaster on that dial, as well as being an Omega. So the heritage, the legacy, it's there, you know, you don't have to worry about it, no matter what the detractors say about the reduced. For me personally, well, actually for everybody, it will always be renowned for what it is. And I think ultimately you get a piece of that with this watch. So let's discuss negatives. Well, the first thing we really have to address is the elephant in the room. The detractors will always forever say, oh, it's not a real Speedmaster. Personally, this doesn't affect me because I don't care what anybody says about my watch. But if you are of a sensitive disposition and like to get into arguments on forums about watches, then perhaps this is not the option for you. So we really should address the value. Now, when I originally bought mine, it was just over £1,000. You could pick these up very easily on the used market. Nowadays, it being discontinued, they're starting to creep up. So it's no longer the more affordable version of the Speedmaster. I would only recommend buying this if you find that the professional too large. Something that does annoy a lot of people is because it has that piggybacking debris de poids, and I'm probably butchering it, so I do apologize, but the piggybacking module for the chronograph, the alignment of the crown sits slightly lower. Personally, it's, you know, it's not an issue for me, but some people really don't like that aesthetic, and the same goes for the layout of the dial, or the sub-dials. I guess at the end of the day, it's just a matter of taste. For me, I don't mind it, so it's not really a massive negative. However, as we're discussing the movement, we should really address the fact that it is rather expensive to service because of that added module for the chronograph. Something I've always noticed is that raised lip, and this goes for the Pro as well. It does tend to catch and attract scratches quite easily. But definitely the biggest negative, and lastly, is the fact that it is rather dated. compared to the 35, 39, 50 that had all the upgrades, which is remarkably drastically more in price. You know, this stamped clasp does not feel secure. Earlier I actually clapped my hands and it came undone, which is a bit of a worry. It feels flimsy. It doesn't feel, you know, the push button deployment that they replaced this with in subsequent Speedmaster reduces dramatically different. Also the water resistance, 30 meters, I'd feel quite nervous about even wearing something like this out in the rain. So certainly not the most robust. And then you've got to take into consideration the rather you know, problematic movement that has been known to be rather unreliable. You know, again, I speak from experience. And not to mention, you know, the newer coaxial racing automatic Speedmasters, which, you know, you've got coaxial in there, all the rest of it, for not much more. So in the whole scheme of things, it's not the deal it used to be. After spending the day with this old friend, revisiting, it feels a lot smaller than I used to remember it. But anyway, yeah, not the bargain it used to be, undoubtedly, but it's still a great watch. It's just nowadays, with what it has to compete with, it's not the deal it once was. Okay guys, so I'm going to leave it there. It's suddenly got very, very hot. It started out cloudy this morning, but yeah, I need a drink after all of that walking about. But it's been a fantastic time getting to know this watch again. I'm going to leave it there. Please add your thoughts, queries, comments, all the rest of it down below. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Chin chin, salute, ciao.
Now before I go guys, I just want to quickly tell you about this extremely cool app that Watchbox have launched. This is my own personal go-to app for everything watch related. Using the app, you can keep track of the real-time value of your watch collection. You can store watches in your digital watch box and even try on watches using an augmented reality. So don't miss out and please go to the App Store and download it today. You can access all of my latest videos right there in the app itself. And if you haven't already, please follow me on the official Urban Gentry Instagram and of course the Facebook UGWC. But most importantly of all, keep it positive, onwards and upwards.